Elena squeezed between two towering Paxidoran delegates, their translucent skin pulsing with what she recognized as agitation. The conclave chamber's curved ceiling displayed a real-time stellar map highlighting the Althean systems currently under Vraxian threat. 11 worlds, 4 already reporting communication blackouts. "Make way for the Draxian delegation," announced the chambermaster, his voice resonating through implants calibrated to each species' auditory range. Elena felt rather than saw the shift as delegates parted. The Draxians, Methan brothers encased in elaborate environmental suits, moved with the privileged confidence of a Tier 1 species. Their ambassador, Cole Vaughn, glided past Elena without acknowledgement, the customary courtesy feel that usually accompanied diplomatic encounters conspicuously absent. Still being treated like we're invisible, Elena thought, activating her neural augment to record the proceedings. Unlike most representatives who relied on their embassy's recording systems, Elena preferred her own equipment, Earth-made, unhackable by standard conclave methods, and programmed to flag subtle behavioral patterns other species typically missed. "The Althean Federation requests immediate conclave intervention," announced their prime speaker, a willowy figure whose silver-toned skin reflected the chamber's light. "The Vraxian advance violates 16 separate provisions of the Non-Aggression Compact." General Thax rose from his delegation's position. Unlike most Vraxians, who covered their chitinous exoskeletons with formal diplomatic shrouds, Thax wore full battle regalia, an intentional provocation that sent whispers rippling through the chamber. "The Althean Federation," Thax's translator rendered in the flat conclave common speech, "harbors terrorists who have sabotaged Vraxian developmental projects. Our response is measured and appropriate." Elena's augment flashed a warning. Thax's left mandible quivered in a pattern her system flagged as indication of deception. The Vraxians' biological tells had been cataloged over 3 years of covered observation, a project she had personally authorized after their first diplomatic encounter left her with an unshakable sense of danger. "Measured?" The Althean's voice rose. "You've blockaded civilian worlds." The chamber erupted in overlapping arguments. Elena watched as the Juxian representative, supposedly neutral, exchanged subtle tentacle signals with Thax's aid. Her augment captured and translated. "Proceed as planned. Our support remains unwavering." Elena's throat tightened. The Juxians controlled 3 strategic jump points that, if closed to refugee traffic, would trap billions of Altheans in the conflict zone. The chambermaster called for order, his ceremonial staff striking the floor with an amplified resonance designed to cut through even Mavorian ultrasonic speech. "We will hear arguments for intervention protocols. Tier 1 species representatives will speak, followed by Earth requests recognition," Elena said, standing. The chambermaster's 4 eyes blinked in sequential surprise. "The conclave recognizes that the human delegation wishes to be acknowledged after appropriate species have spoken." "With respect," Elena continued, keeping her voice measured while transmitting a priority alert to Earth's Defense Council. "Earth requests immediate recognition under Conclave Emergency Provision 14C. Silence fell. The provision, allowing any member to claim speaking rights during imminent security threats, had never been invoked by a Tier 5 species. "On what basis?" the chambermaster asked, unable to hide his incredulity. Elena straightened to her full height, unimpressive among the assembled giants, colossi, and hive clusters surrounding her. "On the basis that Earth recognizes the signs of an impending galactic war, and we are declaring our intention to participate." The conclave chamber's environmental systems struggled to compensate for the heat generated by hundreds of agitated delegates. Frost formed on the Methane brothers' suits as cooling mechanisms overworked. Elena felt sweat beading along her hairline, but maintained her diplomatic posture. Does the human actually believe her species can influence this conflict? The question, broadcast through the translator network, came from the Heliovar representative, a being composed primarily of magnetic plasma contained within an articulated field shell. General Thax's laughter resonated through the chamber, a clicking sound that Elena's neural implant registered as containing both genuine amusement and calculated intimidation. Perhaps they planned to throw their primitive projectile weapons at our dreadnoughts. The chamber's holographic display shifted, presenting Earth's military capacity as catalogued in conclave records. The data was woefully incomplete, deliberately so. Earth had provided only what regulations minimally required during their admission process. The human delegation must clarify, demanded the chambermaster. Is Earth declaring war on the Vraxian Empire? Elena detected the subtle shift in the room's attention. Even species that had ignored her for years now oriented sensory organs in her direction. Earth is declaring that we will stand with the Althian Federation against unwarranted aggression, she stated. We have evaluated the situation and determined that Vraxian expansion represents a long-term threat to all independent systems, including our own. A wave of dismissive chatter followed, but Elena noticed several delegations exchanging concerned glances. Her neural augment flagged elevated stress indicators among 3 species previously identified as secret Vraxian allies. The Althian Prime Speaker approached, his movements conveying both confusion and alarm. Ambassador Reyes, he whispered, bending nearly double to reach her height. This is unexpected. While we appreciate the moral support, perhaps we should discuss practical matters privately. Elena nodded slightly. I'll visit your embassy after this session. Before the Althian could retreat, General Thax loomed over them both. His exoskeleton clicked as chemical signals rippled across its surface, a Vraxian display of dominance that her augment translated as amusing prey behavior. Your species has existed for what, Ambassador? 100,000 years. Mine has conquered 1,000 worlds in that time frame. Thax leaned closer, mandibles nearly touching her face. We have perfected the art of war while you were learning to make fire. Elena maintained eye contact, a deliberate violation of Vraxian interaction protocol, which demanded submission gestures from inferior beings. That's precisely why you'll lose, General, she replied quietly. Thax's translator must have malfunctioned because he tilted his armored head. Explain this illogic. You've perfected a single art of war. We've invented thousands. Elena smiled. And we've spent most of our history fighting opponents stronger than ourselves. The neural augment captured Thax's physiological response, an involuntary release of combat pheromones that triggered warning systems in nearby delegates' environmental suits. The diplomatic breach was subtle enough to be dismissed as a technical malfunction, but Elena knew better. The human speaks with unearned confidence. Thax announced to the chamber, I will personally lead the fleet that demonstrates the consequences of such misplaced pride. As the session adjourned, Elena's comm unit vibrated. A message from Earth Defense Command. As a UNSPAR, activated. All Nona I2 Orange systems, Kion FIRM tar GT acquisition. Awaiting your verification for deployment. Elena glanced at Thax's retreating form. One word from her, and the Vraxian flagship would experience a catastrophic accident before it left dock. She dismissed the option with a quick encrypted response. Maintain surveillance only. Diplomatic ASOLUTIONS still viable. The true power of humanity wasn't their willingness to fight. It was their ability to choose not to. Elena's shuttle descended through Earth's atmosphere. The familiar gravitational pull a welcome relief after weeks in the Conclave's artificial environment. Through the viewport, she observed the sprawling military innovation complex outside New Singapore, a facility that officially didn't exist in any documentation shared with the Galactic community. The shuttle's secure communication system activated. Ambassador, we've detected 3 Kilvary observation platforms tracking your descent, reported Captain Maya Chen. Standard surveillance package. Nothing concerning. Let them watch, Elena replied. It's what we're not showing that matters. Upon landing, Elena was escorted through security protocols that would have impressed even the paranoid Trescan hegemony. Retinal, Neural pattern and DNA verification completed. She entered the heart of humanity's response center. Status report, she requested, stepping onto the command floor where holographic displays showed real-time updates from across human and Althian space. General Santos gestured to a three-dimensional tactical map. The Vraxians are mobilizing faster than anticipated. 17 battle groups crossing these vectors. His hand swept across systems she recognized from Conclave territorial maps. Intelligence suggests they're deploying their Fist of Dominion fleet. Their latest tech, Elena noted. They're taking us seriously enough to want a decisive victory. Good, replied Dr. Barrett from a sealed observation chamber visible through transparent aluminum. Inside, his skin showed the telltale blue mottling of controlled Vraxian pathogen exposure. Their overconfidence is working for us. Elena approached the barrier. Your condition? Improving. I've isolated the mechanism that makes their bioweapons species selective. Barrett gestured to genetic sequences floating in his workspace. Their evolutionary history makes them vulnerable to calcium disruptors that wouldn't affect most carbon-based life. We've developed a compound that targets their exoskeletal integrity without harming other species. Weaponized. Delivery systems are being loaded onto Chen's ships now, Santos confirmed, along with the gravitational disruptors based on the Kethran tech we acquired. Elena raised an eyebrow. The Kethran diplomatic incident had been a nightmare to contain. An unauthorized salvage operation on a damaged scout ship that nearly exposed humanity's more aggressive intelligence gathering. The Althians are expecting conventional support, she reminded them. Santos nodded toward a dark-skinned woman monitoring communication arrays. Commander Patil has been coordinating with their defense ministry. We're giving them exactly what they expect, a token force of outdated ships with predictable capabilities. Meanwhile, Chen added, my task force will deploy from the shadow of Europa using the gravitational masking technology. We'll be practically invisible until we're directly engaged. Elena studied the tactical projections. The Vraxians will divide their forces, standard containment procedure for them. The Althians will follow traditional defensive formations, and will be the chaos element. Chen finished, her expression betraying eagerness behind her professional demeanor. My pilots have been running simulations against Vraxian battle doctrines for months. Their rigid command structure can't adapt to our irregular tactics. Dr. Barrett's voice came through the intercom. There's something else you should see, Ambassador. On his screen appeared microscopic structures Elena didn't recognize. We've identified communication proteins in Vraxian physiology that respond to specific electromagnetic frequencies. Their tactical coordination depends on subtle biological signals between officers. Elena understood immediately. You're saying we can disrupt their command structure at the biological level. Barrett's smile was grim behind his containment mask. The first time they encountered humans in battle, they won't just lose. They'll come apart. Captain Maya Chen felt her ship shudder as another Vraxian energy pulse connected with the outer hull. Warning indicators flashed across her command console, but she ignored them, focusing instead on the tactical display where Admiral Koren's Althian defenders were breaking formation exactly as predicted. Maintain current position, she ordered, watching her crew's nervous expressions. Let them think they're hurting us. The Terra Audax groaned under another hit. Unlike the elegant Althian vessels with their smooth lines and efficient design, human ships resembled industrial nightmares, asymmetrical, bulky, and seemingly cobbled together from mismatched parts. To Vraxian military aesthetics, they appeared not just primitive but fundamentally flawed. That was by design. Vraxian boarding craft incoming, reported her tactical officer. 6 vessels, attack pattern consistent with standard subjugation protocol. Maya nodded, allowing a grim smile. Seal all primary corridors. Activate interior defense grid. Transmit distress signals on all Althian emergency bands. Through the view screen, she watched the Vraxian fleet's methodical advance. Their ships moved in perfect geometric formations, energy weapons systematically targeting the Althian defenders' shield generators. It was textbook Vraxian doctrine: disable, board, capture. They had used the same approach for centuries against technically inferior opponents. Her communication officer interrupted. "Captain, we're receiving a transmission from the Vraxian command ship. General Thax is requesting our surrender." "Put him through," Maya ordered, straightening her uniform. Thax's insectoid features filled the screen, mandibles clicking in what her neural translator identified as amusement. "Human vessel, your situation is hopeless. Your allies are retreating, and your primitive shields are failing. Surrender now, and I will grant your crew protected status under Vraxian conquest protocols." Maya adopted an expression of panic, a carefully practiced look of barely controlled fear. "Our systems are critical. We need time to evacuate our wounded." Thax's compound eyes shifted, scanning her bridge. "You have 10 minutes to prepare for boarding. Any resistance will result in termination of your entire crew." The transmission cut. Maya's expression immediately hardened as she turned to her crew. "Status of the boarding countermeasures. All systems ready, Captain. Security teams in position." Maya activated the ship-wide communication system. "All personnel, execute Operation Labyrinth." This is not a drill. Throughout the Terra Audax, hidden bulkheads slid into place, transforming the ship's interior into a maze of dead ends, ambush points, and isolated chambers. Unlike the logical, efficient layouts of Vraxian and Althian vessels, human ships were deliberately designed with confused internal architecture, a legacy of centuries of naval warfare where boarding actions were common. "Barrett's compound." Her science officer nodded. "Environmental systems recalibrated. The moment they breach, the airflow will distribute the calcium disruptors through their boarding parties." Maya watched the approaching Vraxian crafts on her display. 6 heavily armed vessels, each carrying 30 elite soldiers trained to overwhelm resistance through superior strength and technology. "Signal the Althian commander," she ordered. "Tell him to continue the retreat exactly as planned." As the first boarding craft attached to her hull, Maya activated her neural implant's combat mode. Enhanced situational awareness flooded her consciousness as the ship's sensors became extensions of her own nervous system. The hull breach alarm sounded, a piercing wail immediately followed by the hiss of atmospheric adjustments. "They're in," reported security, proceeding exactly as expected through Airlock 7. Maya's enhanced perception registered the first microscopic particles of Barrett's compound entering the ventilation system. On her tactical display, a countdown appeared, 2:47 until full dispersal. "Begin recording," she ordered quietly. "The Conclave will want documentation of what happens next." Elena stood at the center of the conclave chamber, the holographic displays surrounding her showing footage from the Nuevra battle. The delegates watched in stunned silence as Vraxian boarding parties collapsed mid-advance, their exoskeletons visibly calcifying as Barrett's compound took effect. The recording shifted to tactical overlays of human vessels executing maneuvers that defied standard combat algorithms, accelerating when retreat was expected, presenting vulnerable flanks only to reveal hidden weapon systems. "What you're witnessing," Elena explained, "is not technological superiority, but conceptual adaptation." The chamber master's voice contained barely concealed astonishment. "The human delegation must explain how vessels of their limited capability achieved this outcome." Elena gestured, and the display shifted to historical Earth battles, ancient naval engagements where smaller forces defeated larger ones, guerrilla campaigns against mechanized armies, asymmetric conflicts spanning centuries of human warfare. "Humanity has fought itself more thoroughly than any species in the Conclave," she stated. "While the Vraxians spent millennia perfecting a single doctrine against enemies who fought conventionally, we developed thousands of competing military philosophies." Admiral Zorn of the Althian Federation stepped forward. "The defeat at Nuevra should have been inevitable according to all Althian military projections. Our analysts are unable to model your tactical algorithms. That's because we don't use them, Elena replied. Human commanders make intuitive decisions based on battlefield conditions. We prioritize adaptation over optimization. A ripple of discomfort passed through the chamber. Predictable behavior was the foundation of conclave diplomatic and military interactions. Most species considered humanity's apparent randomness a sign of primitive development, not an advantage. The Juxian representative's tentacles writhed with agitation. The human admits to using biological weapons against the Vraxians. This violates conclave warfare protocols. The compound affects only Vraxian physiology and breaks down completely within hours, Elena countered. Compare that to standard Vraxian conquest protocols. She activated another display showing atrocities from recent Vraxian campaigns, mass executions of resistance fighters, forced labor camps, genetic modification of conquered populations. The Heliovar representative's magnetic field pulsed with distress patterns. These records were sealed by Conclave Security Directive. Yet we accessed them, Elena noted. Just as we've accessed the sealed communications between the Vraxian Empire and its secret allies. The chamber erupted in overlapping translator signals as multiple delegations protested simultaneously. Elena remained calm, waiting for the chamber master to restore order. Ambassador Reyes, Admiral Zorn inquired during the chaos, why reveal this intelligence publicly? You've exposed your methods and guaranteed the Vraxians will develop countermeasures. Elena's neural augment detected unusual communication patterns. Several delegations were transmitting encrypted messages to their homeworlds, exactly as she'd anticipated. That's precisely the point, Admiral, she replied quietly. When facing an adaptable opponent, the Vraxians will attempt to develop specific defenses against known tactics. Understanding dawned in Zorn's iridescent eyes. While you prepare entirely different approaches. Elena nodded slightly. Captain Chen's fleet is already being reconfigured based on Vraxian response patterns. The next engagement won't resemble this one at all. The chamber master finally restored order, his ceremonial staff striking the floor with enhanced resonance. The conclave must evaluate these revelations. All defensive pacts will be reviewed for compliance with. A priority alert interrupted the proceedings. All communication arrays activated simultaneously, overriding chamber protocols. Vraxian forces have begun systematic bombardment of civilian targets in the Althean core systems, announced the emergency system. Casualties estimated at 3 billion and rising. Elena's expression remained diplomatic, but her neural augment flagged a message from Earth. SUVNSPEAR, authorized. Phase 2 INITATD. The real war was just beginning. Marcus Wade sat cross-legged in the center of his workspace, eyes closed as complex datasets flowed directly into his neural interface. Around him, holographic representations of Vraxian communication patterns formed intricate three-dimensional structures that pulsed and shifted in response to his mental queries. "You look like you're meditating," Commander Patil observed as she entered, carrying tactical updates from the front lines. "I am, in a way." Wade didn't open his eyes. Their communication structure resembles Bach's fugues, mathematical, precise, with recurring patterns that build upon themselves. He gestured, and a section of the data cloud transformed into audio, a dissonant, alien harmony that made Patil wince. That's their standard battle coordination frequency. Notice the perfect mathematical progression. Another gesture shifted the tone. And this is what happens when I introduce a seemingly random variation. The harmony distorted subtly, almost imperceptibly to untrained ears. "It sounds almost the same," Patil noted. "To us, yes, but to Vraxian neural structures, it creates cognitive dissonance. Their brains are so attuned to pattern recognition that even minor disruptions cause processing delays." Wade finally opened his eyes, the neural interface fading as he returned to normal consciousness. "How many ships can we reach with the new transmission arrays?" 17 Vraxian command vessels are within range. Patil replied, displaying a tactical map on the workspace wall. But they've adapted their communication protocols since Novra. They're using frequency rotation and encryption. Wade smiled. They're playing exactly the game we want them to play. They've strengthened their mathematical defenses against mathematical attacks. But you're not using mathematics, Patil realized. I'm using music theory. Wade stood, stretching as his neural implant recalibrated. Every Vraxian communication follows strict harmonic principles based on their evolutionary development. They can shift frequencies and encryption all they want, but they can't change the underlying harmonic structure without losing coherence. He gestured toward another display, showing the current Vraxian fleet formation around the Althian colony world of Luminera. Their formation is shifting, Patil noted. They're anticipating another biological attack, while making themselves perfect targets for something entirely different. Wade activated his communication array. Captain Chen, is your task force in position? Maya Chen's voice came through, distorted by the interference of active combat. Ready on your mark, Wade. Transmitting harmonic disruption patterns now. Wade's fingers danced through the holographic interface, sending the carefully crafted discordant signals toward the Vraxian fleet. These will cascade through their command structure over approximately 3 minutes. Time your assault accordingly. On the tactical display, the Vraxian formation appeared unchanged, but subtle indicators showed their coordination beginning to degrade. Ship movements became slightly less synchronized, response times to threats extending by milliseconds. They don't even realize it's happening, Patil marveled. Their systems show no signs of external interference. Because we're not attacking their technology, Wade explained. We're attacking their cognition. The display suddenly lit up with alerts as Chen's task force emerged from hiding, executing a complex attack pattern that exploited the microscopic gaps in Vraxian defenses. Ships that should have responded in perfect coordination hesitated fractionally, commanders processing orders slightly slower than normal. Dr. Barrett wants to know if you're monitoring the physiological effects, Patil said, checking her communications. Wade nodded, expanding a section of data showing real-time biological readings from captured Vraxian officers. The disruption is causing stress responses similar to what they would experience in unfamiliar gravity conditions. Their decision-making capacity is degrading by approximately 8% per minute of exposure. Will they realize what's happening? Eventually, but by then, Wade gestured toward the tactical display, where Chen's forces were systematically targeting Vraxian communication nodes. The first Vraxian dreadnought's engines flared in an emergency restart sequence, a sign that its command structure had ordered a full systems reset to clear the perceived malfunction. By then, Wade finished, they'll be fighting ghosts of their own creation. The Vraxian flagship Inevitable Dominion loomed in Earth's orbital space, its massive silhouette eclipsing the lunar transit. General Thax stood on the command deck, his exoskeleton supplemented with additional battle plating, a visible sign of his determination to personally lead the assault on humanity's homeworld. Deploy the subjugation fleet, he ordered, mandibles clicking with anticipation. No surrender options. Earth will serve as an example to any species considering resistance. His subordinates transmitted the commands, but Thax noticed a momentary hesitation in his second-in-command. You question my strategy, Sub-Commander. The humans have demonstrated unexpected capabilities. The officer responded carefully, perhaps a more measured approach. Their victories were anomalies. Thax interrupted. Here, at their homeworld, they have nowhere to retreat, no surprise tactics left. They will face the full might of the Empire. The command deck fell silent, officers focusing intently on their tasks. None dared mention the unprecedented losses in recent engagements or the troubling intelligence reports of unrest throughout Vraxian territory. Earth's orbital defense platforms, primitive by Conclave standards, activated as the Vraxian fleet approached. Their weapons barely scratched the advanced shielding of the invasion force. As expected, Thax noted with satisfaction. Begin planetary bombardment of their military installations. Energy signatures detected, reported his sensor officer suddenly. Multiple vessels appearing from inside the lunar shadow. Fax's compound eyes narrowed. Impossible. Our sensors would have detected. The tactical display erupted with alerts as ships materialized from seemingly empty space. Not human vessels, but warships bearing markings of the Jexari, the Movidians, and most shockingly, 3 Vraxian colony worlds. The righteous vengeance. Fax's mandibles clicked in agitation as he recognized a Vraxian dreadnought that should have been securing the outer territories. By whose authority does Governor Krell deploy Imperial vessels to Earth? His communication officer worked frantically. They're not responding to authentication requests, General. They've removed Imperial identifiers from their transponders. The realization struck Thax with physical force. Rebellion. Not just from subjugated species, but from within the Empire itself. Incoming transmission, announced the communications officer. From Earth's surface. The Lena rays appeared on the command screen, her expression calm despite the imminent battle above her world. General Thax, I see you've met the Coalition. What deception is this? Thax demanded. No deception, only consequences. Elena's image was joined by other faces, representatives from dozen worlds, including several Vraxian colony governors. While you were focused on military victories, we were building alliances, not through conquest, but through shared interest. Governor Krell's chitinous features appeared prominently. The colonies have voted for independence, Thax. The outer territories will no longer fund the core world's endless wars. Treason. Thax's exoskeleton flushed with combat hormones. You will all be. Your threats mean nothing, interrupted a Jexari ambassador. The Empire's financial networks have already been restructured. Core world accounts have been frozen by colonial banking authorities. Elena spoke again. You can still order your fleet to attack, General. But you should know that similar coalitions have formed around every Vraxian battle group in the galaxy. Your empire isn't just facing military defeat, it's already experiencing systemic collapse. Thax's tactical display confirmed the ambassador's words as reports flooded in from across Vraxian space. Colonial governors declaring independence, subjected species rising up, supply chains disintegrating. While you were studying our weapons, Elena concluded, we were studying your entire civilization. The question now isn't whether you'll lose this war, General. It's whether there will be a Vraxian empire left when it's over. For the first time in his military career, General Thax found himself utterly without a protocol to follow. The United Nations Assembly Hall had been redesigned to accommodate delegates from 37 species. Environmental bubbles housed methane breathers alongside carefully maintained gravitic platforms for high-density beings. What had once been the Security Council chamber now served as the primary negotiation space for the Post-Vraxian Settlement Commission. Elena observed from a side entrance as Dr. Barrett presented his findings to the assembled representatives. He'd aged visibly in the months since the war, the lingering effects of his self-experimentation etched into his features. The genetic damage inflicted on subjected populations can be reversed within 3 generations, he explained, displaying molecular simulations above the central table. We've developed targeted therapies that accelerate cellular repair without compromising species-specific traits. And what guarantee do we have that these therapies aren't simply another form of human manipulation? Asked a former Vraxian colonial administrator, her translator rendering the chitinous clicks into the neutral diplomatic language. None, Barrett answered candidly. Except that we're providing the complete research data and manufacturing processes to all member worlds simultaneously. No patents, no proprietary claims. The administrator's compound eyes registered surprise. The concept of freely shared medical knowledge violated fundamental Vraxian principles of leverage and advantage. Elena stepped forward as Barrett concluded his presentation. The medical protocols represent only one aspect of reconstruction. We now open the floor for economic transition proposals. Admiral Zorn, now serving as the Althean Federation's lead representative, activated his data node. The Federation proposes establishing transition zones between formerly contested systems, with graduated resource sharing based on development needs rather than military strength. Impossible, objected the Heliovar delegate, magnetic field pulsing with agitation. Resource allocation by need creates dependency cycles. It also creates stability, countered Captain Chen, who had joined Earth's diplomatic corps following her military service. Our historical analysis shows that pure competition models inevitably lead to resource wars. Elena watched the debate unfold, noting how species that had never voluntarily shared a negotiation table now engaged in genuine dialogue. The Vraxian Empire's collapse had created a power vacuum that, against all predictions, hadn't resulted in chaotic fragmentation, but in emergent cooperative structures. General Thax entered the chamber flanked by human security officers. No longer wearing battle plating, he seemed diminished, though his posture remained rigidly formal. As the designated representative of the Vraxian core systems, all that remained of the once vast empire, he had expected execution or permanent imprisonment. Instead, he'd been assigned to work with Marcus Wade on untangling the complex network of dependencies, alliances, and subjugations that had defined Vraxian rule. The core systems delegation requests recognition, Thax announced formally. Elena nodded. The Commission recognizes General Thax. We have completed analysis of the reparations proposal, he stated. The resource commitments are significant, but acceptable. A murmur passed through the chamber. The Vraxians had never before accepted any limitation on their authority, let alone reparations. However, Thax continued, we request modification to the oversight mechanism. The core systems cannot accept direct human supervision of implementation. Elena had anticipated this. Vraxian cultural identity couldn't survive such a public subordination. What alternative do you propose, General? A multi-species commission, with equal representation from former subject worlds and neutral systems, Thax replied, including human observers, but not under human authority. Elena exchanged glances with Chen and Barrett. This wasn't just a diplomatic concession, it was a fundamental shift in Vraxian thinking, embracing the concept of shared authority rather than hierarchical control. The human delegation finds this counter-proposal constructive, Elena acknowledged. We support further development of the concept. As the session adjourned, Admiral Zorn approached Elena privately. Your species continues to confound expectations, he observed. You won the war, yet you seem determined to ensure the Vraxians save face in peace. Elena smiled slightly. Humiliation breeds resentment, Admiral. History teaches us that how you end a war determines how long the peace lasts. Human history, Zorn noted. Perhaps that's what the galaxy has been missing.